I am Evelyn Rourke, 69 years old. I never thought I would reach an age where my own daughter stood in front of me with her arms crossed, repeating the same sentence as if I had not heard it the first time. "You need to apologize to Barbara," Hazel said, her voice tight in that way she used when she was already convinced she was right. "If you cannot do that, then you can pack your things and leave until you are ready to be respectful." Respectful. That word sat heavily between us, like something sour. I had been staying with Hazel and her husband for only a few weeks while my hip healed. The doctor said the recovery would take time, and Hazel insisted she wanted me close so she could keep an eye on me. I almost believed her. I wanted to believe her. But as the days passed, it became clear that I was a guest in a house where Barbara Whitlow, Hazel's mother-in-law, had quietly taken over every inch of space. Barbara corrected everything I did. The way I folded towels, the way I seasoned chicken, the way I rested my cane beside the couch instead of against the wall. She inserted herself into each moment, dripping condescension as if it were a perfume she wore purposely strong. Hazel noticed, but she did not intervene. If anything, she bent toward Barbara with a nervous devotion, like someone afraid to disappoint a woman who had, somehow, become more important than the mother who raised her. Tonight, it boiled over. Barbara sat on the far end of the sofa, lips pursed, hands folded over her lap in a neat triangle. She looked pleased with herself, as though she had finally maneuvered the pieces on the board into the perfect configuration. Hazel stood at the center of the living room, trying to look decisive. "You owe her an apology," Hazel insisted again. "For what I asked softly," Barbara straightened. "For accusing me in front of Noah, for undermining my role in this family. I had said one thing, one calm, simple thing about Noah's safety. But Barbara had twisted it into something else entirely." Hazel waited for my reaction. I could see it in her eyes. She expected anger, or tears, or pleading. She expected the version of me who spent decades smoothing every rough edge so she could have a better life. Instead, I felt something inside me settle. "All right," I said. Hazel blinked. Barbara's eyebrows rose, anticipating a surrender that did not exist. I did not say another word. I turned and walked slowly toward the hallway, letting the weight of their assumptions cling to the silence behind me. Hazel let out a small smirk. She thought she had won. She had no idea what my leaving would set in motion. And as I closed my bedroom door, the past 30 years began rising in me. Uninvited and unstoppable memories that would lead me straight into the truth I had avoided for far too long. I stood in that hallway longer than I meant to, my hand resting on the doorknob. My breath caught somewhere between anger and disbelief. The sound of Hazel's footsteps faded, and with it, the years I had held together with the thinnest thread began to unravel. I raised Hazel alone through Portland's hospital expansion years, the late 1980s into the 90s, when every clinic was understaffed and every shift ran past 12 hours. I worked nights on the surgical unit because the differential pay meant Hazel could have new shoes for school. On weekends, I picked up extra shifts so she could stay in dance lessons. The fatigue built quietly, the kind that settles in your bones long before you notice it. When Hazel turned 18, I handed her the acceptance letter to Oregon State and told her she was going, even if it meant I worked myself sick. I paid every tuition bill piece by piece, month by month. I remember falling asleep at the kitchen table with a billing ledger open under my cheek. Hazel once said, "Mom, you made it look easy." I laughed then. I did not laugh now. After she married Evan, I helped them with the down payment on their first home. Hazel cried when I handed her the envelope. "I do not know how to thank you," she said, but gratitude fades quickly when comfort replaces struggle. Barbara appeared not long after the wedding. I noticed the way she hovered, the way her opinions became instructions. The way she absorbed authority the moment Hazel's confidence faltered. It was subtle at first, corrections disguised as guidance. Criticism softened with faux concern. Hazel tolerated it. Then she defended it. Over time, she absorbed Barbara's version of right and wrong so fully that my presence became an inconvenience. Standing in that hallway, I realized the shift had begun long before tonight. I just had not wanted to see it. The argument everyone kept circling back to began 3 days earlier, on a Thursday that should have passed quietly. Barbara had insisted on watching Noah while Hazel worked late. I stayed in the living room to give them space, listening without hovering. When Noah's voice rose from the kitchen, thin and shaky, I looked up. Barbara was nowhere. I found him on a step stool, stretching for a glass. "Noah, sweetheart, let me help you," I said. "Where is Grandma Barbara?" "She went outside to talk on the phone," he murmured. I lifted him down gently. When the sliding door opened, Barbara froze at the sight of us. "What exactly are you doing?" she demanded. "Keeping him steady." I said. "He was reaching alone." Her eyes thinned. "So now I am negligent? I did not say that." "You implied it," she snapped. "You always do." Later, when Hazel came home, Barbara rushed to her. She accused me of abandoning Noah, humiliated me in front of him. I stepped forward. "That is not what happened." Hazel raised a hand. "Mom!" Why Barbara stood behind her, triumphant and silent. Hazel did not even look at me, only at the version she had already chosen to believe. Hazel stood in the doorway of my room as if she were announcing a policy change instead of speaking to her mother. "Pack your things," she said. "You can come back after you apologize to Barbara." I folded a blouse and placed it gently into the suitcase on the bed. "I understand. That is it." Hazel sounded irritated, almost thrown off. "You are not even going to try to explain yourself. I already did." I said, "You chose not to hear it." Barbara's voice drifted in from the hallway. "Hazel, dear, let her pack. We have had enough disruption for 1 week." Hazel glanced back toward her, hesitation flickering briefly. "Mom, you brought this on yourself. You cannot talk to people that way." I told Noah to be careful on a step stool. I answered. "That is all." Hazel's jaw tightened. "Barbara said you embarrassed her." I did not reply. There was no benefit in chasing her version of truth. Instead, my mind drifted to another conversation, one from 6 years earlier. When Hazel and Evan were scrambling during the housing spike in Portland, prices were climbing by the week. They had been denied twice for mortgage approval. Hazel had cried at my kitchen table. "Mom, we cannot keep renting. Noah needs stability. We found a house, but the bank says we need a cosigner." I remembered placing my hands over hers. "Then I will cosign." "Mom, that is too much. We could never. I want you to have a home. Let me help." And I co-signed the mortgage, paid the closing costs, and filled the gap when the childcare bills came during Hazel's maternity leave. Every month had been a careful dance. My retirement stretched thinner, so their future could be wider. Barbara never knew. Hazel let her believe she and Evan built this life alone. "You will be more comfortable at your own place," Hazel said now, crossing her arms as if the decision were routine. "Just until you apologize." I zipped the suitcase slowly. "All right." Hazel blinked again, confused by how easily I accepted the exile she thought would break me. As I slid the final drawer shut, a thought settled over me, not loud, not triumphant, just steady. Maybe leaving was not the loss Hazel imagined. Maybe this was the moment I finally stepped out of a house that had my name on the paperwork, but not in the life inside it. I moved slowly around the room, not because of my hip, but because every object I touched carried a memory Hazel no longer seemed to remember. A stack of folded sweaters, photographs she once insisted I frame, cards Noah made when he was learning to write his name. I opened the bottom drawer of the dresser. Inside, tucked beneath old tax folders, were the envelopes I had kept out of habit, the receipts and records of the life I had helped Hazel build. I pulled out the first sheet, mortgage contribution. It read in my handwriting. I traced the date. It was the month Hazel and Evan had fallen behind, the month she had called me in tears. I had transferred the money without hesitation. Another document surfaced, a bank printout showing transfers I made during her maternity leave. $200 here, $300 there, childcare payments that allowed Hazel to return to work without drowning. Then I found the folder she had begged me to sign 5 years earlier, when the refinancing went sideways. Just until the loan clears, she had said over the phone. Please, Mom, we really need this. I had signed the guarantee because I trusted her to handle the rest with honesty. I sat on the edge of the bed, the papers spread beside me. The weight of them was heavier than the paper they were printed on. Not because I regretted helping her, but because she had let someone else erase those years as if they were nothing. I reached for an empty binder on the desk and began sliding each document inside mortgage receipts, transfer records, child care agreements, the notarized addendum from the refinance. Page by page, the binder grew, a quiet record of everything unseen, unthanked, taken for granted. No anger rose in me, only clarity. When the last paper was inside, I closed the binder gently. My name was on most of the signatures. My labor filled the dates. My sacrifices shaped the margins. For the first time in a long while, I stopped wishing Hazel would notice. I gathered the binder to my chest and stood. It was time to let the truth carry its own weight. The next morning, I left before Hazel woke. The house was silent, Barbara's perfume still lingering faintly in the hallway. I carried only my cane, my purse, and the binder pressed flat under my arm. At the Multnomah County offices, the clerk glanced at my paperwork. "Are you here to file all of this today?" "Yes," I said. "Every page." She nodded and began stamping forms one by one. The first document was the revocation of guarantor status, the very guarantee Barbara had pushed Hazel into renewing during the refinance. Removing my name meant the bank would reassess their eligibility immediately. The clerk slid the stamped copy toward me. "This goes into effect as of today." I thanked her and passed the next document, a formal notice of interest in the property. My contributions gave me every right to place protections on the house. Barbara would learn that soon enough. Finally, I handed over the affidavit detailing the safety concerns with Noah. The clerk scanned it carefully. "Do you want this filed under supplemental record?" "Yes," I said. "It needs to be on file." By the time I stepped outside, the morning air felt sharper, cleaner, not lighter, just honest. I walked 3 blocks to my attorney's office, so Mrs. Wiggins had represented me for more than 10 years, long enough to read my face before I spoke. "Evelyn," she said gently. "What did they do this time?" I laid the binder on her desk. "I need one final page drafted. A formal withdrawal of all financial responsibility going forward. No ambiguity." She opened the binder, scanning the documents with tightening lips. "They have been leaning on you harder than I thought." "I let them," I said. "But that ends today," Mrs. Wiggins wrote quickly, then turned the document toward me. "This is the one they will not expect." I signed it without hesitation. When I left her office, the binder felt different in my hands. Not a record of what I had done for Hazel, just the truth, finally standing on its own. Barbara and Hazel had depended on my stability for years. They would feel the loss the moment they learned I had stopped catching them. I was gone before sunrise. By the time Hazel woke, I was already settling into the temporary apartment I had rented the night before. I imagined her moving through the kitchen with that self-satisfied calm she always wore after an argument she believed she had won. Later, I learned how quickly it cracked. Hazel pushed open the door to the guest room with a rehearsed little scoff. She really ran off unreal. But the room was empty. The drawers were open, nothing inside. The bed was made. My cane was not leaning against the wall. My suitcase was gone. Only the binder sat in the center of the bed, its spine facing the doorway. Hazel stepped toward it, the confusion on her face shifting into something closer to unease. "What is this?" she murmured. Evan appeared behind her, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "What are you talking about?" She handed him the binder. "Mom left this." He opened it. His expression changed within seconds. His voice dropped. "Hazel, these are legal filings." Barbara marched down the hallway, irritated. What now? Has she finally stopped sulking? She reached the doorway, ready to deliver another cutting remark, but froze when Evan held up the revocation document. "Do you know what this means?" he said. "The refinance is invalid. The bank will review everything." Barbara snatched another page, the notice of interest on the property, and color drained from her face. She cannot do this. She has no right. "She has every right," Evan said tightly. "Her name is on half these agreements." Hazel's voice trembled. "She filed all of this today, before anyone could answer." The front door burst open, and Mr. Latimer, the family lawyer, rushed in, out of breath. "Where is Evelyn?" he demanded. "Tell me she did not submit these. Tell me you stopped her." Hazel sank onto the edge of the bed, staring at the binder as if it had materialized from nothing. The smirk she had worn last night was gone, erased so completely it was as if it had never existed. Power, I suppose, slips quickly when it was built on someone else's silence. By mid-afternoon, the fallout had already begun. Evan called first. His voice was sharp. Clipped. "Evelyn, the bank just notified us the refinance is suspended. They said the guarantor revocation triggered an automatic review." I did not answer. I let the call fade into silence. A second message arrived minutes later. Hazel, this time, breathless. "Mom, please call me." The interest rate jumped. "They said we might lose our approval. What did you do?" Another voicemail followed, then another. I set the phone face down. Later, I heard from a former co-worker at the community clinic that Barbara's childcare arrangement had been flagged for review. "You know how these things go," she said gently. "An affidavit is enough to trigger oversight." Meanwhile, Hazel and Evan's argument spilled into the hallway of their home. Evan shouted, "Your mother co-signed everything. You told me she was barely involved." Barbara's voice cut through. "This is her revenge." "No," Evan said. "This is the consequence." Hazel's calls came steadily 10, then 15, then over 20, some angry, some panicked, some pleading. I listened to none of them. I rested my hands on the binder beside me, its weight steady and unbothered. While their voices continued to echo through a phone I no longer felt obligated to pick up. My new apartment in Selwood was small, but it was mine. No raised voices, no footsteps waiting to judge me, no tension curled into the corners of every room. On the first morning, I sat at the little kitchen table with a cup of tea and felt something I had not felt in years, my own breathing. Steady and unguarded. I began water therapy for my hip at the community center. The instructor, Mara, remembered me from my nursing days. "You still move like someone who pushed through too many double shifts," she teased gently. "I did." I said, "I am trying to unlearn it." She smiled. "You are allowed to slow down now. In the afternoons, I worked a few hours a week at a small clinic near the riverfront. Familiar paperwork, familiar faces. Dr. Reyes, one of the physicians I used to assist, looked surprised to see me. "Evelyn, I thought you retired for good." "I thought so too," I said. "Turns out I needed something to come back to." He nodded. "We are glad you are here." I spent evenings catching up with old friends from the hospital. We talked about everything except Hazel. Not because they avoided it, but because I never brought her up. My life no longer revolved around her choices. Each day settled into a rhythm quiet, steady, unhurried. A life built not on obligation, but on the simple fact that I had survived enough to deserve it. My phone still lit up with Hazel's name more often than I cared to count, but I let each call pass. I had stepped out of the storm she created. I had no intention of walking back into it. Hazel showed up at my apartment door just after sunset. She looked smaller than I remembered, shoulders drawn in, hands twisting together as if she were holding on to the last pieces of her certainty. "Mom," she said, voice thin. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside. She entered slowly, like she was afraid the floor might give way under her. "I know what Barbara did," Hazel said. "I know she twisted things, but I let her. I wanted her approval. And her voice cracked. "I treated you like you were in the way." I let the silence stretch, not to punish her, but because rushing would not change what had been done. "I am not here to ask you to move back in," Hazel continued. "I am not asking for money. I want to fix what I broke." I sat across from her. "There will be no shared household again," I said. "No more financial ties. And if we stay in each other's lives, respect is not something we negotiate." Hazel nodded quickly, tears falling. "I understand. Truly, for now," I said softly. "We take small steps." She leaned forward, not for a hug, but for acknowledgement. I gave her that. When the door closed behind her, I let out a breath I had been holding for far too long. The apology I needed had never been hers to give. It was the one I finally gave myself. If you have been following this story, tap like or leave a comment to share where you are watching from. It helps more than you know.